All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Canberra Dynamics 365 user group. Happy Tuesday night. Are you pumped? Yes. Woo! Strange lot. Excellent. Okay, that's great. My name's Craig Harvey. I'm your MC for tonight, so I'm just going to facilitate the evening. First of all, welcome. Thank you very much. A couple of things of housekeeping. First up, we're going to record the session tonight. So what that means is we're recording the screens, recording the slides, and recording the audio. So there's no visuals, but just a heads up that we are being recorded. If that's a problem, come and see us. We can edit you out, whatever. We'll deal with that. So let me know if there's a problem. So tonight's agenda, some other housekeeping. So hands up if this is your first time here. There's a few new faces. I've seen you before. Excellent. Well, welcome. So the format of tonight is pretty much up on the board, but some housekeeping if you're unfamiliar with the building. If you go out that door and to your left, the bathrooms are just there opposite the hall. And in the event of an emergency, if we do have to evacuate, the emergency exit is back out to the lift. Not the lift itself, obviously, but just over from the lift there is a stairwell we can exit. The assembly point is down the road at the First Church of Science. But one of us Microsofties in the room will help you out. So that's myself or Dan, Gargan, anyone else? Very good. So this user group is run by the community. There's a bunch of people on the community. So Avi at the back there is part of the community committee that runs this. Mark, where are you? Mark, Singh, put your hand up. All these people help actually make these happen. So yeah, that's how it works. Now, we'll go through a couple of items of news and then we'll get to your main presentation, which is what you're all here about. Or maybe it was just for the pizza, I don't know. So this is a repeat of the news item from last month, but I thought it was a good one to repeat. Dynamics 365 Saturday is an event that's happening in 3 locations across Australia this year. So the 4th and 5th of May, so you'll also note that it's actually 2 days, so I don't know how you have 2 Saturdays in a row, but that's another thing. So 4th and 5th of May in Sydney, Melbourne and Perth, as you can see the dates there. So if you're interested in that, get along. I'm pretty sure the event's free, so it's not run by us personally, but it's well worthwhile getting along. From feedback from last year was a lot of great content from MVPs and other people within the industry who use Dynamics. So that's worth checking out. The other thing is there's a new user group that's going to be starting up here in Canberra around Microsoft 365. And the first event is actually on the 10th of May here in this office. Not this room, but the very next room. So you've already passed the first test. You know how to find a location. The 3 things that they'll be covering in that first event is really what's currently new in Office 365. There'll be a whole 30 minutes and session on cloud calling. Then there'll be a section on Teams for Business, and they're followed up by Q&A. So we'll probably just put reminders up of all the various different user groups that happen around town. Not as much as I think it's all about Dynamics, sometimes there's other things that are actually useful to know about as well. I know you can't see that link because it says RSVP here, but if you get the slides after this session, you'll be able to click on that. But if you were super keen, just contact either one of us or your account manager or whoever your contact is with Microsoft to find out more about that event. Okay, and this is going to be a quick reminder or a quick recap that you've probably seen the 3,000 news articles in the last few weeks around the opening of our new Canberra-based Azure regions here. I'm not going to go across all that detail, but apart from obviously a huge part of that was the announcement that a lot of those services, so not all of them, there is a list, have also achieved the protected status. So just a recap of that. If you have any questions, I guess a lot of you are asking what about Dynamics 365, and the information I can give at this point is really at the moment it's unclassified DLM. And then, but if getting Dynamics 365 to protected is of interest to you, please let us at Microsoft know so that we can add that to the case of the long list of people who are really keen on that. So, any questions about any of those news items? You done with me? Let's go with the main show. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Right, well, this crowd feels sufficiently warmed up. They're raring to go. So I'm going to get out of the road and let our main presenters come up. So tonight we have a session on Agile and Dynamics, the theory and the practice. And I'd like to welcome up Susie Barrett and Peter Holland from Oakton, who are going to take us through it. Thank you.
So thanks everyone for coming. So as the title suggests, we're just going to be talking about our experience. Where's our slide?
Carry on. Now for the interpretive dance. I had one job. There you go. Thank you.
Cool. So we're just going to be talking about our experiences delivering Dynamics projects, but specifically what's worked for us at Oakton. And we're happy to take questions mostly at the end. If you've got anything pressing at the time, please feel free to ask. A little bit about me. I'm a senior digital analyst. It's quite a mouthful. At Oakton, have been with Oakton for almost 2 years, and the last 3 projects we've delivered have been Dynamics, and they've been in government. So this is Peter.
And my name's Peter Holland. I've been with Oakton for 8 years, the last 2 years of which I've been a developer in the Dynamics 365 team. So what are we going to cover tonight? Oh, there we are.
Story checks out.
yes, that's proof. So these are the areas we're going to cover tonight. Does it really work? Can you do a successful Dynamics 365 implementation using the Agile methodology? Who's doing what in an Agile implementation? So who are the team members in a development team? How do we develop a backlog for 365 projects? How do we define an MVP? What did we learn in our previous projects, and what tools did we use? So what do we usually hear? Well, some of the things we often hear from prospective clients are it won't work. You can't successfully deliver a Dynamics 365 project using Agile methodology. Well, we have successfully managed to. We've successfully managed to deliver a number of successful solutions at a number of client sites, which we'll be discussing later. In terms of it works with Agile, certainly if the Dynamics 365 project itself forms part of a much larger program of work, then it might be a good idea to incorporate the Agile as part of a much larger waterfall framework. But we've managed to successfully deliver purely within the Agile framework itself. And in terms of product limitations, that usually just comes down to managing client expectations, involving the client at every step of the process and demonstrating to them what the product is capable of doing. And the big question is why? What are the benefits of actually delivering a Dynamics 365 solution using the Agile methodology? Well, Dynamics 365 itself, as you probably know, is a very powerful tool. It comes with an enormous amount of inbuilt functionality, which can be leveraged right at the beginning of the project. And it's ideally suited to the Agile methodology, because if you plan each of your sprints to incorporate small, manageable chunks of work, then it's highly customizable and you can rapidly deliver demonstrable results at the end of each sprint. And we've done it, and it works. So a couple of the client sites we worked at, Department of Industry, Innovation and Science, they are currently in the process of determining a new site for their National Radioactive Waste Management Facility. And this involves a lot of community engagement, because they're not going to build it on any site unless they have strong community support. And they needed us to develop a solution for them which allowed them to track all the contacts they'd had with members of the community and with organizations in the community. And for the Treasury, they needed a system to help them manage all their communications with their stakeholders, a stakeholder management system to store information about all the contacts, all the organizations, and all their correspondence with them. So if we go into Agile Roles for a 365 project.
Just before I go into the Agile Roles, at Oakton we use Scrum Agile. So we're going to be covering the 3 sort of key areas, which are the Scrum roles, the Scrum artifacts, and the Scrum events. So the roles that typically are in Scrum, as most of you would know if you're doing Scrum, there's a product owner, the Scrum Master, and the development team. So our development team, there's a core sort of development team that we've been working together for a while. So that's 2 devs that know CRM quite well. There's me as the digital analyst who's got quite enough knowledge of CRM to work with the client to make sure that they're not getting led astray with what CRM can actually deliver. And then we have testers and Scrum Masters as depending on the project. So this is actually us. Well, actually, it's our avatars. These are the avatars we used on our Scrum board. We like to have a bit of fun with it, and we like to think that we're all superheroes. But so we do, as you can see, we have named titles, but we're quite multidisciplinary, as I sort of said before. So our delivery manager, who's here in the audience, we're all qualified Scrum Masters, so he also has helped with testing, he's helped with a bit of dev, and he sort of knows other things, not just Scrum stuff. As I said, I know, so I've got a traditional BA background, but I've moved into the Agile way of doing analysis, so hence the digital analyst role. And then we have experienced designers as well. So our roles cross over, so we do work quite well together, or closely together, really. We have 3 developers at the moment, so Peter being one of them, and our testers. Now, the thing we found with testers is that we've had a few, and it really helps that they understand the concepts of dynamics, because we've had a few testers that have come in and had actually wanted to test the actual functionality that's already out of the box, and that's obviously not what we want to test. So we found that our team really has to know dynamics really well, but the product owner doesn't need to know it as much, because that's our job to teach them what to do. We also have a Scrum Master a Scrum coach that comes in, that keeps an eye on us, making sure that we are keeping on track with our Scrum sort of way of delivering. And it's also a way to show that our product owner that this is how we do things, and just to sort of give them a bit of a reason why we're delivering in that way. So the product owner is very key with most of our projects. And what we found is that we've had various levels of maturity with our product owners. Often they're quite new to Agile, they're often very new to Dynamics as well. So as I've said, they don't need to know that much about Dynamics, but it does help that we teach them the basics, like what an entity is, what a form is, what a field is, just those things, so that when we're developing user stories, they actually know what we're talking about. We've also, with some product owners, because they're new to Scrum, we've got a little bit of a pack about a product owner, what they need to do, what their responsibilities are, why they need to turn up to our Scrum events, that sort of stuff as well. So that helps with bringing them along. We've also found that co-locating with them is quite helpful as well. So it can just, go over the partition and say, hey, is this how you want to do things? So I've covered the fact that they need to know a bit about Dynamics, but also the key things is they have to have the authority to make a decision. They need to, for example, we had a product owner that was a grad, so they kept getting overruled by their project manager. So they were great. They were really good with knowledge, about the system and how to build it and what needed to be done. But they, when it came to prioritising what we were going to deliver, they kept getting overridden. So they had, your product owner's got to have that authority to do that. They've also got to have the knowledge to prioritise. So to deliver that MVP, to, make sure that all the right things are getting delivered at the right time. And they also have to have that time to dedicate to the Scrum events. They've got to be able to come to our refinement. They've got to come to planning. We can't do that sort of delivery without them there. So that's the importance of product owner. So now I'm just going to talk about a little bit about how we deliver or develop our artifacts, which is essentially our backlog for 365. So this is a little bit busy, but what it's really showing is the going from the high level detail down to the detail. So, understanding what needs to be done, why it needs to be done, and how we're going to eventually do it. So the what we usually work with, obviously, the product owner and the more strategic kind of stakeholders to understand what the vision is and get the scope. And to do that, so we've used such tools as Lean Canvas. I don't know if anyone's seen that before, but it's really handy understanding what the key problems are, what the solutions are, who your main users are, and, other things like, metrics and things like that. So it's really handy to then get a vision, and everybody knows when they're building the Dynamics solution that that's what they're heading for. So, for example, if you're just going to build something that's just to capture stakeholder engagement, that you can just use basic out-of-the-box fields. But if you want to start doing processing and using cases, then that that's what you're going to have to incorporate as well. The why is then when we start getting into the detail, we'll start understanding the key activities, and then we start using a lot of user experience tools like the user journeys and experience maps. They really help define the processes and the key data that needs to be captured, and maybe even some integration that needs to happen there. So from there we can start building up the backlog. You can start writing your user stories, and the acceptance criteria and all the detail that you need. So then you can start identifying, your epics, which might be translated into an entity in CRM, or might be fields. So that's how we do it there, and it seems to work for us. We have a lot of different tools, but it's just depending on the project, the ones that we use. So this is a bit of an example. So we're not always lucky to be able to get some requirements up front, but sometimes we do. So it just means that we've got to then make them fit into Dynamics and make them fit into Agile. So as you can see, we had some great requirements here. They were sort of categorized, which helped us identify the entities that we might need to use, and some of the key areas that we might have to tackle first off. But we've also found that there's some common things that we've done in our delivery, especially with Dynamics, especially for government. You have common things like, they usually want contact information, they usually want the account, and then we name that to organisation. They will always want the activities if they're tracking phone calls and emails and things. But they generally don't want the sales stuff. So they usually want the sitemap to be redesigned and things that are hidden that are too busy not to be there. So there's some standard stuff that we know that we might need to include in our user stories and epics to clean up some unnecessary fields. But there's also stuff that we know that we'll need to do, and then we can get detailed of all the extra things that need to be delivered. So this was at Treasury. So that was what our backlog looked like. So these were our epics, and they did really line up to the entities, and these are our user stories. You can see we did start to prioritise them, but we had little numbers up there so that we knew that those were the things that we might take into the next sprint. So a little bit about MVP. With Treasury especially, we had 4 sprints to deliver an MVP. So we were lucky that we were able to identify the key epics up front. And as you can see, what we did there was we said, we know that these are all the key areas that we want to do, but given that we've only got, you probably can't read that, but that's a sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 4, and we'd identified the key features and the stories as we went along, but we said, we can start looking at integration in sprint 1, but we probably won't do a full suite of integration over here. Or we might do all the contact information, we'll get up to the up front, and we'll deliver that within the 4 weeks. After the MVP goes live, we can start enhancing it. So there was just a little diagram to show how we could explain to them that the MVP could be delivered, and then they could help prioritise the backlog for them. So this is just another example of what we did. So this was a bit of story mapping. So at Industry, we identified some of the key areas that they wanted to capture. So we identified those as our epics, and then the features were below. So we did colour code it because we knew that the blue bits we could quite easily do with out-of-the-box fields for CRM, and the other bits we might sort of need a little bit more work for configuring like the activities and the items, and obviously the last few results. But so that was just a way to map it, and they could have then mapped a roadmap from that. From there, we picked one of the features, and we went in and used some UI to get a bit of this is a very high level user journey, just shows where the interactions were, what we needed to capture. And from that, we then talked to the stakeholders, got a lot of the detail from the end users. It's not clear, but so we identified the key activities, some of the business process flows, some of the key touch points, so we knew we had to do some email integration there, what the challenges were, and some of the key data and outputs from what from the process. So so from there, it ended up looking like, well, essentially that's what it looked like. So I know that that's a big leap. So we did have user stories, but I'll just go on. This slide here is the way that we build up our user stories is that we have a bit of a checklist. So that our definition of ready is a checklist for us to say, well, this is what we need to include in our user story. This is so we know that it's ready to go to refinement. We have covered all these areas, and the definition of done is once we've delivered it, we know we've checked it off, we've done our testing, we've done that sort of stuff. But the importance of that, it just means that we're not writing user stories that we can't work off. It means that they're all sort of standard. We know what to expect. The developers know what to expect. We know what we have to write. So it also means that anyone can write a user story. It's not just me as a digital analyst. The product owner can do it. Developer can do it. If we know that we need to have a story that needs to go in the backlog, we've got a bit of a checklist. Scrum.
Right, so this is an example of a typical sprint cycle. So at the beginning of every sprint, we have sprint planning. This is where the whole team sits down with the product owner and we go through the backlog. Now, the most important component of any sprint planning session is cake. We have to have some good cake or fudge. We can sometimes have fudge. And we go through each and every story that we think we'll be able to deliver during the sprint. And as a whole team, we work out what the requirement is, what the business requirement is, what the technical requirement is, and then we all size the story. We all vote, and it's a blind vote. So we each just vote and hold the card up, and then we reach total consensus. And that's how long we say that story is going to take. And we make sure they're small, manageable chunks. So it's usually between 1 and 4 days for each story. And then once we have decided on the list of stories that we're going to tackle during that sprint, we then get to work. Every day we have a daily scrum. So from 9 till 9:15, we go through the board and say what we did the day before, what we're going to be doing today. Before some of the major stories, we'll have a kick-off meeting. So we'll actually sit down, the developer and the tester and the product owner and the digital analyst and whoever's needed. We'll go through an individual story and actually get down into the real detail of every technical requirement and every business requirement and build up quite a good description within the story itself. And that will be the record of what was actually done. And then once all the stories have been developed and tested, at the end of the sprint, we have sprint refinement. We have the sprint review, where we actually demonstrate each story to the product owner. So we actually project it up on a board and we go through, we demonstrate Dynamics 365, and we read out what the story was, and we actually demonstrate step by step. We'll actually step through it. And then once the sprint review is over, we have a sprint retrospective, where we simply look back over the sprint, say what worked well, what didn't work well, and what we can improve on. And then we start the next sprint.
Oh, we got to the end of it. So some of the key things, obviously we said that as a team, so there has been a core team. We work really well together, and as people come and go, we sort of go through that normal group development, the forming, norming, storming, performing. Because there is a core set of us and we know how we do Scrum and Agile, we can quickly return to the performing state of our group because, we've been doing this for a while. We usually do have a sprint that is we do have a habit. We know that your sprint planning comes on, the first day of the sprint. We know that review will be on the Monday. We know that retro happens straight after that. We know where we have to be for these things. So we can, because of those habits, we can quite quickly just return to performing and developing our stories. The product owner, we've learned that, they're like your relatives. You just get given a product owner. Yeah. So you've got to deal with that. And we currently have a great product owner, which is really, really helpful. But you do have to take them on that journey. You do have to teach them. You do have to sort of be patient with them and make sure they're coming to all the right events. Our toolkit and our artifacts, as we know, we do have a key set of things that we need to deliver. Obviously, the backlog is very important, and then making sure it's all ready for the sprint. And we do use various tools depending on how we need to analyse it or provide that that value in the story. And events, the sprint duration. So we've had the project that we're currently on is a 2-week. We're doing 2-week sprints, so things happen very quickly. The client likes that. It means that they can, during review, they get to see the product quickly. We get feedback quickly. It's much faster. But we've found that our developers do like a bit of a longer time to get in, settle, figure out what it is that they need to build. So they do prefer a bit of time. So at Treasury, you did have 3-week sprints, and that worked really well. But you go with what you've given.
And yes, CRM strength. I mean, Dynamics 365 it's a very powerful tool. It has an enormous amount of inbuilt functionality, which can be leveraged immediately, as I was saying. And as long as you manage your stories so that they are small, bite-sized chunks of work, you can very rapidly customize it and very quickly demonstrate to the client what can be done. It is important to manage those expectations, and with the Scrum methodology, as you involve the client through every step of the whole process, you're constantly showing them the product, so they get more and more involved with it, and they have a greater and greater understanding as the project develops. And so they're less likely then to come up with unrealistic storylines. So yes, customer involvement, by involving them through every single stage of the project, it makes the project really, truly collaborative and gives them a real sense of ownership. So I think those are all really, really key lessons that we've learned. Oh, that's perfect time.
So we're happy to take questions because Stu's going to answer them, aren't you, Stu?
That was ominous.
Did you find there was, because you're involved with the client a lot, was there a lot of scope creep or a lot of reprioritisation as you went through? Or?
Well, I think we managed that all very well as part of sprint planning. So
Yeah.
if there is any sense of scope creep, our Scrum Master will quickly jump in and say, well, we can deal with that during a later project, or it's beyond the scope of this particular story, or we can create another story to deal with that one. Yes.
But it's that thing with managing expectations as well. You sort of say, well, you've given us this deadline. You know how long it takes us to build these things because you've gone on this journey. You've seen what we can deliver each sprint. If you need to cut back on certain things, that's really up to you what you need to prioritise. So if you put it back in their hands, just sort of say, we've got this deadline. What's more important to you? What can we go live with? What can't we go live with?
With the challenges of product owners being maybe a little bit new to Agile sometimes, how often do they just go, oh, I need to come to a meeting every 2 or 3 days?
Oh. You have had that on.
Come back to me later,
Yeah, no, and I think that was why we did find that they couldn't quite grasp, especially when you've got refinement and review. They kept getting confused with which one was for what purpose. So that was why we sort of gave this little pack to our current product owner and said, well, this is what we do in refinement, this is why we need you there, this is what we do in planning, this is where we need you to prioritise it, this is where we get your vision, and review, this is where we need to get your feedback, this is where we need to have stakeholder engagement. We were quite clear with saying, well, this is your responsibility, this is your role. We kind of live it flexible.
Can I add to that, Susan? Sorry.
Yeah.
I was just thinking it probably something leading on to that question that we try really hard as we start up a project is to really have those tough conversations at the start to say, well, we've had some clients say, can I commit my product on 50% of the time? So we say, okay, as we commence the project, this role really needs to be 100%. If it's not going to be 100%, then how can we support that through the team? So maybe we make the digital analyst more of a proxy product owner, which isn't ideal, but it's ways to help support the product owner to not have to commit as much time potentially. And we also help set the expectations to say, we often find that product owners don't have enough time to commit, and they might find this really challenging at the start. So we talk to the program manager or the program lead about that and say, we commonly see that it might take 4 or 5 sprints until they start to adjust to the cycle of attending all of the sprint planning, sprint review, retros, all those kinds of things. So I think helping maintain some of that the mindset from the start doesn't make it perfect every time, but sometimes it can help for the executive to understand that they will need to commit some time throughout the project and how long it will take them to get used to it.
Yes, the man in the front.
So, I've got a two-part question. I guess part of what you indicated before is that sometimes you get presented with requirements up front, which is obviously great, which sort of defines, I imagine, the overarching scope. Other avenues is where you are fully dependent upon the product owner to start feeding information about what you want the product to do. How do you deal with a situation where the product owner is presenting you with a concept that they want delivered, which goes over and above the capabilities of the product?
So we did have a little bit of that with our existing project.
Well, one of our, let's just say, one of our developers is very blunt in explaining that can't be done. Next.
No,
not quite as far as that. But.
Yeah. So look, our current product owner, he had a grand vision, and it was great. And he said, we're going to possibly do online forums. We're going to bring it to all these partner agencies. We're going to do this. We're going to integrate with all of this, and it was great. But we just sort of said, well, how about we just stand up Dynamics first of all? Let's see how we go with that. Then we can do an online forum, see how that fits in, see how that works. Let's see where we can integrate with and take them on that journey. I think not promising everything up front, or just sort of saying, yes, it's a great vision.
So how soon can you anticipate that challenge? I guess if you're doing sprint planning, one sprint ahead or maybe two sprints ahead, depending on how full your backlog is. I guess the challenge would be is that if you're part of the way through the implementation and then all of a sudden you hit this roadblock because that's what they want the customer to be able to deliver, but then at the end of the day you can't deliver that, and then therefore you're at a sort of standoff because there's a lot of implementations around Canberra whereby we've wanted to heavily customise the product to meet the client's need, and it's obviously leads us to putting the product in a situation where it may no longer be able to be upgraded or dependent upon another system. Or
So I think that the thing with Agile is you can go really quite early. So with the 2-week sprints, we were able to sort of, or with any sort of project, I guess, you can say, well, this is what we've got now, in the system. If you start customizing it, it will be unmanageable or unmaintainable. So let's just take baby steps, and we'll keep showing you at each step what it looks like. Then we can redefine what it is that end goal might actually be. I don't know, you guys might have some
that's a very good process. So the product owner is very involved with backup refinement, and we are fully transparent in our approach. So we tell them it's achievable through customization or development, but that's the risk that you're taking in terms of supporting the product in the future. And then the way to prove the concept of the solution that we're putting forward, basically. This thing is worth investment, it's worth development, and possibly the challenge supporting the system and future upgrades. When we go forward, and at the end is the product and sets the direction for the team. We can only advise and recommend to contribute obviously, but if they want to get additional features that are not in the product, we basically follow their lead.
I think the big thing, and Cindy said, it's that taking implemented steps, so saying to the product owner, this is the out-of-the-box functionality. We're working in 2-week sprints, let's put that out there, and then let's let it sit for a sprint. And at the end of that 2-week period, we're going, that really doesn't work for us. We need to put in some customization. Then we can look at that and look at minimum customization. But chances are you put in that minimum out-of-the-box configuration and they go, actually that was enough. That was really all we needed.
And I think that really helps with the user engagement thing the whole way through the project as well. I've worked on projects as well where the product owner is saying, all these great bells and whistles and everything's going to be shiny. And we're like, okay, we can definitely talk about that. But what if we go to a group of users with what we've done so far and get their feedback? And feedback from users is, actually, this is perfect. This is just what I need to do my job. And the product owners kind of said, okay, I thought we had to have more shininess than that. It's taken them a while, but they're starting to trust the users rather than their own view of what needs to be customised, potentially when what could be configured meets the needs of the users. So having that ongoing feedback loop from real users regularly in every sprint makes a really big impact on how much we do moving to hopefully not customised. So that's unquestionable.
Well, I guess it was a bit of a later question, because I guess surprise. No, because as a lot more of these large implementations of Dynamics starting to come into play, it's great for a short 4 to 6 week engagement. Stakeholder management is great. But when you're anticipating, you know, a 9-month to 18-month implementation, which is sort of predicated on quite a large transformation for the business, what do you do in an agile sense where you get a view of what's coming? What is the overall solution might look like? It's kind of like an iterative waterfall to a sense, because it's an upfront view of what potentially the entire solution might look like, so that we don't stumble upon roadblocks 9 months in and we're like, we can't deliver and have to get to divert or pivot or whatever we want to do. But sort of getting confidence to the end user can deliver. And part of that might be through the formal process of writing a submission and saying, yes, you know, achievable and here's the requirements going up, but even reinforcing that universally. I guess if you go in blind to a certain extent, rely on the product owner to deliver the outcome of scope and iteratively deliver that to you, and then all of a sudden you've done across this major constraint. How do you manage that?
Where our tools come in. So I think Susie briefly touched on like story mapping and the idea of getting your epics and your features. I know you had a slide up there about what you did at Treasury up front. So even if they haven't come all up front of requirements, you're getting a picture at the start of this is the epics, this is the features that we need you to deliver. So you're already getting a sense of right up front there's, okay, we can deliver 50% of that with configuration, not a problem. The rest of it is going to need customization. So that's probably then where you're going to invest the time in refining that and really looking at whether that's what you need to do.
So does that get then, as a summary to that then, do you do some level of upfront scoping for larger projects to do those sort of artifacts so that you get a holistic view? Because I think part of your presentation was about the fact that you continuously do user journey mapping and artifacts reduced along the process as opposed to getting some elements of it up front, which just kind of breaks the agile model. I can understand, you know, you don't want to have to do upfront analysis to its nth degree, but I guess it's a confidence factor for the client who's purchasing this solution or resulting in end up with this solution in the end. They can meet their expectations.
Absolutely. And I think it does look a little bit about the user experience approach that we merged with our Dynamics teams. I think at first there were some people kind of saying, why do you have a UX in with the Dynamics team? How does that work? But being able to create a big service map that showed the end-to-end process and how technology supports that has been really powerful for us, I think. On the project that Susie and Peter are working on at the moment with Stuart, I think when having that big service map was the first time the senior responsible officer for the project, one of the assets out there, said, oh, this is the first time I really understand how technology is actually going to support my team to do their day-to-day business. And I think that then gave him a view of it more effectively, and we could have better conversations around, okay, what are the priorities for you for implementing Dynamics? What are the biggest pain points? Let's look at that through our user journeys and our stories and say, if this is a really big pain point that can be really easily solved through some minor configuration, let's tackle that first and get some small wins and more trust in how we're delivering Dynamics.
Yes.
Okay, I've got a question which I think Jargon will figure that. Can you buy a product owner off the shelf?
Can you buy what?
A product owner off the shelf.
Without configuring him?
No, without And have you worked on projects where the client has decided to buy their own product owner from a consulting firm and give them to you and find that that project is successful?
Well, our current product owner is a contractor. I don't know if that counts. So yeah, the product owners are often contractors.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they're commercial off the shelf.
Yes.
Yeah.
And some of them we've worked very well with. Yes. And I haven't really, it hasn't really made a difference, I don't think, the fact that they're contractors. I haven't felt that
I
that's
would
made
recommend it because the product owner has to be invested in your business.
Mm.
If you get a consultant come in, they're going to have their own agenda.
Yeah.
Mm.
Sorry, I know we're. Product owner has to be invested in what they're delivering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that extreme, but it's still big.
Yeah, and I mean the project you worked on where that might have occurred, and I might have been the director.
So my new product owner is a service offering, is not going to go.
Yeah,
I do have a question around your tools. So is that tools that you actually host yourself, or is that with the customer? So when you're actually doing your sprint planning, for example, and you're going through your epics and features and stuff, is that done in your environment, or is it done in the
Usually it's at the client's environment. So we're using TFS in our existing one, and I think we use the STS industry TFS at home.
And what sort of documentation other than this is done?
Documentation.
It's a big,
No,
I'm
so-
not really talking about Agile. and
Yeah.
documentation
So the
required,
current
but-
project, they did want some document deliverables. We just, they wanted a business requirements document. And we kind of said, well, that's not very agile, but what we can do is we can say, we've got a bit of a roadmap. We know roughly, we didn't call them epics as such, we just called them your high level sort of requirements, and we sort of broke them down and said, well, here's a bit of a roadmap. And we colour coded our phases and said, well, this is probably what you want out of these high level requirements. I think there was some migration, I think there was some, basic contact information, and there was something to manage business process flows for processing, one of their key things. So we said, okay, we'll probably deliver those as epics, and we said that in the document, but we also said that all the detail will actually be in TFS. We'll give you all of that detailed requirement as user stories in TFS. But we also explained during that how the analysis would happen in an agile way, so that we said, during this business analysis process or analysis process, we'll be talking to stakeholders for this particular feature, and this is how we'll do it. We'll probably hold workshops for some certain thing, or things like that. So we also do have, I think, a technical specification, which is it gets updated regularly once we do a sprint. Well, we try to update. It's part of our definition of done is once we've done a story, we're supposed to update the technical spec as well. So that's how we sort of manage it, because they had those document deliverables, but we sort of had to sort of merge it a bit with our agile.
So is a
processes.
sprint full of development activities, planning activities, or does it include testing as well?
So each story would involve a bit of analysis to make sure that we're developing the right thing. It will include the development or the implementation and the testing. So that definition of done says that we have to understand what we're doing. We've built it, it's gone through the QA process of actually testing, and then it's gone through the product owner, if required, to make sure that it can go to review. So that story itself will have test cases attached to it as well, and it will have a little bit of a technical section saying, well, we've got to build this plugin, or we don't have to build it, or we just build a new entity, or we customize this entity and add these fields.
So this is unit testing or system testing? Or testing.
You could probably answer that better than me.
Sorry, it's a bit loaded.
Yeah, no.
I'd say it's unit testing. It's unit testing. It's testing each of the stories that are part of the sprint.
But we do have a tester. Then we sort of, once you guys develop it, we deploy it, and then we do pass it on to our tester to test it as well.
So deployment is also part of the equation of the sprint?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the objectives at the end of the sprint is releasable production. So we've got some project where with a pretty good level of maturity, where every 2 weeks at the end it should be pushed to production. And then we've got other projects where they still have a very strong CAP process. So we basically deliver a package, and then they want to do full integration testing because they still want that's fair. So we give it to them, and they run the full waterfall regression test, and then they push it to production like 2 months later, and they're happy with it.
I think it's probably better if you just bring up that table that had all the 3 week sort of, daily sort of things, just for the sprint cycle.
Sprint cycle?
Yeah. So it's actually done at the last day of the sprint?
No.
What happened, once the story is finished, we then promote it up to our test environment.
So let's assume no dependency between zero.
Yeah, that's what I expect.
So if you go to our definition of ready for
the independent. Yeah. Can be tested by it.
So the second point there, because there is an independent negotiable value testing.
So you have a dependency in sprint 1 for having the testing while ready. If you want. I'm just.
Yes.
Sorry,
yes.
I'm probably going to.
It's only not because in an ideal world, that's what happens. It doesn't always happen.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question.
At the risk of sounding agile, how much effort is gone into before you start any of these sprints? Like, well, how big is the sprint 0? How much lead up?
There is no sprint 0.
Yep.
Um,
How did your backlog magically appear?
How did the backlog? So we did. So
Because you're grooming it at the start, but where did it come from?
well, I think I said earlier that we do have a standard set of things that we know we've got to do, and we go and we can say, okay, we've got dynamics. We know that you'll probably want your contact entity done. You'll probably want your organisation entity, and you'll probably want some cases done. So we'll just say, okay, those are your probably key entities. What do we need to do? Can we just use the out-of-the-box fields? Do we need to restructure some of the fields so that the more usable ones are at the top? Do we change account name to organisation? Because, you know, government don't call an account.
Sorry, that's part of the scope of the work that you've taken on? And there's no analysis going into that, or there is some upfront analysis that identifies that account is now called organisation?
Oh, no, we usually actually ask the client. We usually suggest it, given that we've sort of known that previous clients have wanted that, so we usually say, we can change that for you.
So there is a sprint zero then?
We didn't have a sprint zero in this project, but we have had sprint zeros before.
Okay.
And I think it's usually what the client would feel comfortable with and what they've been given. So it's, you know, it doesn't always happen, but.
Sure.
So how do you come up with the sprint duration? So why 3 weeks?
Well, 3 weeks was just, I guess, negotiated with Treasury and I don't really know.
We tend to find that we'll do a shorter sprint duration, so 2 weeks generally, with a client that's a little bit more mature in its agile understanding, they're a bit more confident about what's happening. Or potentially if we want to build up to maturity very quickly, so if we want them to see some trust delivered really quickly, some quick wins, and we want to show them what can be deployed into production in a 2 week period. I think where Pete mentioned the project Department of Industry where we did an MVP in 2 weeks. We might try to go for a short duration. Alternatively, if the team feel that they want to have a lot more in a production release, they might go to 3 or 4 week duration.
We started with 4 weeks, and the next sprint we got it down to 3 weeks, and now we're doing 2 weeks. So we found that the wastage is less if you come to know earlier. So you can, whatever work's been done in 2 weeks, you could trash it away, start from scratch. But if you do it for 4 weeks, it could be worse, it could be more stuff.
It's industry standard as well to stick with 2 or 3 weeks. If you have a longer sprint, then you are too far into it before realizing that it's like you scrap your work.
And we also notice that because you increase the sprint length, that you really increase the amount of work that you're taking on. So the longer it is, the people usually drive their task longer too. So if you get it in 2 weeks, you deliver quickly and get this result going. So we did the same at one of our projects. We started at 4 weeks, and the team itself, they were self-organized. They noticed that they have not reached their optimum basically, and we reduced, and we figured that 2 weeks was the best for the team. And doesn't mean 2 weeks for a while.
Just answering another question you asked about the product owner. What we did is we brought the business in before even starting any work. This is the Department of Health. This was new, so we brought the business area and the product owner in a half day, like a game session. And we brought an agile coach, and the games were targeted at why we're doing it and how it's going to benefit. So they had certain games where you pass the ball once, twice, thrice, and then 5th time, because we were timing it, they said, at the end of the games, they said, first time you took 25 seconds, second time 20, third time you took 15 seconds. What does it tell you? You're doing the same game, but you got used to each other's passing the ball. So that's how you start with a bigger sprint, and then you bring it. And then they changed people during the game sessions. But one person come out and suddenly they added somebody else in the game, and they said it took longer. So that means when you change your developers, testers of this during sprints, it is going to take you longer, no matter which product you're building, whether it's development, whether it's it was bringing the mindset of the people to what Agile is. It's not just waterfall is better or this. Sometimes things work, sometimes not. But just bringing in a coach really helped change the culture.
Question. I've got a really valid question. Michael just discussed it with me.
TFS, obviously we're all Microsoft fan people here, can't say boys or girls, because that would be gender specific. Using the products of TFS, such as Micro Focus or HP, Application Lifecycle Manager, or say Atlassian products instead, how applicable are they in the development of Dynamics 365 and doing the sprints? Is there any particular advantage or disadvantage in using the non-Microsoft product to develop your epics, your stories, etc.?
We haven't used non-Microsoft products. I haven't actually used those other tools much, so I can't really.
Okay. Well, obviously, we'll talk about that. The reason why I say that is Michael raised a very good question. Some government agencies do mandate the use of ALM. So HP ALM, I do see a tool that's actually now Micro Focus as a tool for managing agile type projects.
We use a different product.
Doesn't cause any issues.
No, so yeah, I've used Jira and Jammer,
Yeah.
and they seem fine. I mean, it's how you structure it first of all. You know, you don't just use it out of the box. You do see a little bit, so make it work.
Even me as Microsoft, but our customers don't always use all Microsoft stuff. So I've got projects that are going on where the testers using HP.
Yeah.
It's not great, but
Well, yeah, Micro Focus ALM too.
So I mean, there's overhead and all that kind of stuff, but I mean, we can coexist.
But are there any advantages for using TFS in doing the design?
For me, the main advantage for Phoenix is that it's on-premise. So a lot of our clients that are using it on the secure and so on, so that is on their environment compared to Jira and so on, which are not. That's one of the advantage with TFS.
We're using HP. But we found that if we were using VSTS, it would have the code and everything would have gone with a better central life cycle. And we are having the same issue developing in Microsoft and using HP.
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to say that it's actually code as well that you're managing.
Yeah.
That's an artifact as well. It's not just your user stories.
Yeah.
There is some linkage to your code, to your test cases, your test results and things like that. So if that's all done in VSTS or TFS, it's got the full life cycle of the product. So
code is being saved in VSTS and TFS, but we've got a separate screen in HP just to look at the user story and how many points, and we put in how long it took. So we've got two systems to do for the project managers to find out the costings and stuff.
Dan, you had a question, unfortunately.
Back on your definition of independent user stories for functionality, you can independently deploy in another environment. I guess we probably haven't talked much about the challenges of working within Dynamics and how Dynamics sits inside the Agile framework, because I guess there are certain challenges, I guess, with the product that might be kind of a whole team working on one functional area of Dynamics at the same time, whilst independently trying to strip a whole piece of functionality out and independently deploy it. We're talking about sort of unmanaged solutions and what's your solution structure. It's probably quite technical, but I guess it's probably a lot of inside knowledge about how the system works and can actually take one component out. So, and like I said, I think there's an example around, as I said, it might be just sort of validating an address for a contact when the contact is created, which talks to an independent service, which is talking outside of the organisation. If the user story definition is validate address for a contact, how far through is it actually go, and what do I deploy out as a manageable piece of functionality into the next environment? I know there's dependency between it, to break it down, so I've got a single field that validates the address, but then a separate report goes through to an action which might talk to a web service, might carry through so on and so forth. How do you make the decisions about the scope of the story such that I know that I can extract a piece of functionality from another environment? Because I think that in itself would cause an overhead, potentially.
Well, I think when it comes to integration with a third-party tool, the way we've done it is, first of all, we break it down into very small stories. And one of the first stories in an example like that might be a proof of concept. Can we actually connect to this third-party tool? Can we actually copy something across from Dynamics 365 successfully to that tool and then bring something back? So you'd start off with a very small proof of concept, which might be a 3 or 4 day story, and then build up on that. Then the next story might be, okay, now incorporate some validation. Can we actually build some code which will validate based on information we can pull back, and just build up and build up. But that example you gave is a big chunk of work, and if you try and do it all in one go, then it could get tricky.
That is, if I'm working on a contact entity and I'm trying to extract that out and deploy it into another environment, so somebody else can test, but then I've just built a relationship between that entity to another one, with the rest of my development team working at the same time. If I try and extract that into a solution deployed in another environment, it'll fail. Because there's a dependency model that's got to be adhered to, the whole solution has to go with it. So, I mean, in principle, it sounds like a great option to be able to pull and test in flight. But how does it go as when you've got a larger team sort of working on it? How do you sort of get past that? And can you then, pivot to another sort of test strategy, or, because the scope and definition of a story, I think, is the hardest part of this. And for those that worked on an agile story, an agile implementation before, is how do I talk to business? How do I articulate what the story is? How do I feed it through a development team and get an adequate result out the back with enough information such that it's, it's there to be completed? But also highlights the dependencies between other areas of the development team working at the same time.
Yeah.
Because I know in some projects before, we've had to bundle the whole solution up at the end of the sprint and deploy because of the dependency of everything together. So I mean, if there's something you've sort of dealt with before that sort of talks to how you can preempt dependencies and maintain your independent story view.
I mean, with the project we worked on, that's never really been something we've experienced, because the projects we've done have been relatively small, like just 2 or 3 developers on each project. So that's never really been a concern. I mean, something like that, yes, would
Has anyone else got a view?
prove a challenge.
Got some experiences that they could share?
I think for bigger projects, you'll probably start chunking up work that makes sense. And yeah, I mean, probably not independent. There might be dependencies that you can manage as stories as well. Maybe. Not sure. Stories in separate parallel work streams. Several work streams, yeah.
We'd also call out dependencies between the stories to complete full sprint.
Because they would be linked, right? So like one parent of those 2 dependencies. So the smaller ones are the unit of work that you do in the one sprint, and eventually that will go up to one bigger story finish.
No more questions, right? It must be over. No more questions from Danny.
All right, that was a very good interrogation. People, well done.
No, Jamie.
Oh, sorry, one more question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Suppose we have one product and it has been gone through definition down, and it's like business owner is happy and we finish it off. Suppose that was sprint 1, right? And we moved to sprint 2 and suddenly we found the bug on that one. How do you guys manage that part? Like in terms of testing, in terms of going to business, in terms of working with the developer?
Well, the bug becomes another story in the next sprint, which we then discuss during the sprint planning, and we size that bug and we deal with that like any other story.
So usually, if we found a bug during testing in that sort of, say you found it in that first sprint, if it is fixable within that sprint, we'll include it in that sprint. But if it's so large that it needs extra work, we will include it as a separate story. We won't call it a story, but it is a TFS item that we'll need to bring, and we'll size accordingly and add it to our velocity when we're planning. So we sort of do take it into consideration as its own separate piece of work. Was that what you were sort of asking? Or?
My question was mostly like, suppose if you finish one product backlog item in sprint 1, and you have already done a definition down, right? Then you have already moved to like sprint 2 and 3. Suddenly you find a bug there which is already packaged before. So that time, like,
I would question why it got through in the first place. Yeah. No, it happens. It happens.
Gone to production with your release, or are you still going through development?
I think we can say that it's going to development. Like it may have gone up in the UI or it's a tested now.
It's you might have just missed it in testing.
It comes back in the backlog refinement.
Yeah, so we
bugs can come at any time. They go, and whether how critical it is has to be prioritized in the backlog refinement.
I think the same would come if you did a demo and then they go, oh, now that I've seen it, can we change it to this?
Yeah.
You're going to turn around and change it. Go, great, you put it in the backlog and consider that. Cool. Any more questions? Sorry, I didn't fella. Okay. Excellent. Well, thanks very much, Susie and Peter. That was great. Now, for those of you first time here at the Canberra Dynamics User Group, was that the best presentation you've ever seen here?
Yes.
Excellent. And all the regulars pipe up and say, yeah, that's also the best one we've seen as well. No, that was really great. Thank you for your time. So thanks. That was wonderful. I forgot to point out, Megan is also in our committee. Hands up, Megan. Yep. Now, the reason I point that out is, and the reminder of everyone at the committee is, we're always interested in feedback. How well did you like the session? What kind of topics would you want to hear in the future? We are still planning as we go throughout the year. There's always opportunities. You don't have to do a full presentation at the same time. If you've got something you're passionate about and you want to show a cool example of some work that you've done in, 5 or 10 minutes, come and let us know. We can put it in the backlog and consider the priorities. Talk to the product owner.
Just to add that, I will send out the survey I sent out last week, or last session, I should say,
yep.
Which gives you a chance to answer all those questions, and feel free to put some information in there if you aren't excited.
Cool. So some handy URLs up there. We've actually published the video recording of last month's session as well. So Dan and I presented on polls and some of the magic that can happen there. So those URLs are up there. The next meetup, or the next user group, is scheduled for the 15th of May. I think we've just got to confirm availability of the room. So keep an eye on the meetup site in case that does change. We'll let you know. So, but generally it's the third Tuesday of every month. So without further ado, we won't turn this into a prolonged goodbye. So thank you very much for your time. A few of us will stick around for some question and answers if you want to have a chat afterwards. So thank you. Thanks for coming.